Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Scrum in the Age of AI, Empowering Teams While Preserving Empiricism. My name's Eric Naiburg, and I'll be your host today. I'm the COO here at Scrum.org, and I'm joined by Michelle Midboe, who will introduce herself shortly. Next slide. So just so everybody's aware, your microphones will be muted throughout, but the session is recorded. The slides and the recording will be available via the website within 24 hours, often quite faster than that. If you have questions, please don't use the chat. For questions, please put them in the Q&A box. You'll see that down at the bottom of your screen, and we will take questions throughout. We'll take questions at the end, depending on timing and the like. Next slide. So just briefly, if you're new to Scrum.org and Scrum.org webinars, who is Scrum.org? We're a mission-based organization focused on helping people and teams solve complex problems. We're founded by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum. And Ken created Scrum.org back in 2009. And he presented the first papers on Scrum back in 1995. What we do is we do training, certification, and ongoing learning like this webinar. Next. And I will let Michelle introduce herself.
Thank you, Eric. Everyone can hear me, I hope. Well, Eric can hear me. You guys can't respond. So let me begin to give you a bit about who I am and why this topic matters so deeply to me. So I am Michelle Midboe, like Eric said. I serve as a director in AI consulting at EPAM Systems. I hold degrees in both computer science and psychology, and I generally rely on both those degrees every single day. The computer science taught me how systems are built, how architecture scales, how software behaves under complexity, and then now how AI integrates into the enterprise ecosystems. Psychology taught me how human behaves inside the systems, how we make decisions, how we respond to change, how we trust, and how we learn. And I think it's really important that everyone keeps in mind that AI transformation is never purely technical, it's always behavioral. And so early in my career, I was a full stack engineer building applications end to end inside the product development lifecycle. And over time, I became more interested in not just how we build software, but in how organizations build software. And so that curiosity really moved me into organizational transformation, using those agile practices, using Scrum, and strengthening that transparency, collaboration, and accountability at scale. And so today I sit at the intersection of engineering, behavioral science, and AI enablement. So let's zoom in to a little, oops, can you see my screen, Eric?
Yes.
Is it still working? Okay,
Yep.
good. So I want to talk about our partnership that we have with Scrum.org, and it has been awesome over the last couple of years as we have started meeting, writing white papers, and now we have this event that we're working on together. And so we recognize together as partners something important. Knowledge work is being reshaped faster than most teams can adapt. And so Scrum teams are already using AI, often without clear guidance. And the risk is not adoption. That risk is unintentional erosion of that empiricism, of ethics, and of learning. So Scrum.org brings that stewardship of that framework, protecting the integrity of transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And then EPAM brings the enterprise experience, integrating AI into real product ecosystems across industries and at scale. So together we co-authored some papers, research, guidance, exploring how GenAI intersects with Scrum, not to change Scrum, but really to ensure it remains strong in this new experiment, in this new way that we're doing work. And this partnership really matters to us at EPAM because AI is not just a tooling conversation; it's a ways of working conversation, and so that leads us exactly into this topic and talking about why this topic, why now. So we talk about AI adoption. It's accelerating faster than organizational maturity. Within just a few years, we're going to see majority of enterprises, they'll have AI embedded into production environments. And so, like I said, and like Eric has and I have had conversations about, the question's not really whether teams are using AI because they already are. The real question is how AI is influencing the three pillars of Scrum, those transparency, inspection, and adaptation, because AI really amplifies the conditions it enters. So if a system or an organization is strong, AI will strengthen it. If that system is weak, AI will expose and accelerate that weakness. And to understand the implications of this, we need to first understand what has fundamentally shifted. So let's talk about Scrum in the GenAI era. GenAI compresses those feedback loops that we use in Scrum. It generates that synthetic knowledge instantly, so fast we can't even believe it's done, right? It automates cognitive tasks that once required deep human effort. AI can draft our backlog items, it can generate code, summarize retrospectives, and forecast delivery timelines in seconds. But AI does not understand nuance. It does not feel empathy. It doesn't carry accountability. And so that's something as we're like using AI in our day to day, we have to remember that, and that it reshapes how we learn, but really Scrum stays. It doesn't have to change. But how we practice its pillars must evolve in a world where output is instantaneously. The first pillar of Scrum, transparency, is directly impacted by this. And so transparency, we know, has always meant visibility. So in the AI era, it must also mean traceability of reasoning. Before AI, when someone produced a solution, teams could explore how they arrived at that conclusion. They'd have lots of conversations about this. With Gen AI, those outputs and the reasoning layer become less visible. The output sounds really smart and authoritative, right? And it may appear complete, but the assumptions underneath it are really embedded and invisible. We had a healthcare engagement that we were working with at EPAM, and AI was used to generate user stories. And unfortunately, it incorporated outdated regulatory data. So structurally sound, user stories look great, but they were actually completely wrong. Because the output looked so professional, the risk was not immediately apparent. So through transparency, we need to have deeper inquiry when we're using AI. Where did this originate? What data shaped this context? What might be missing? If transparency weakens, then inspection becomes shallow. So then let's talk about inspection. Inspection is really that mechanism that we all know of learning. It's the engine of empiricism, right? It's how we learn, and learning is not the same as producing output. And so AI can dramatically increase the volume of artifacts it produces. More user stories, more test cases, more experiments. And in one retail organization, we had using AI to generate A/B test hypothesis. So it was great. They were so excited. We based it on historical performance data, customer behavior patterns, and almost immediately the experiment volume doubled. The dashboards looked impressive. Most tests more tests were running, more data was being collected, that cycle time improved. Everything looked good on paper and in the reports. But something really subtle changed inside the team, something that's really pure and important to agile teams and to Scrum. Instead of like having the conversation, debating the assumptions behind all of their hypothesis, they began trusting the AI's framing. Instead of asking, why do we believe this will create value? They said, oh, let's just launch this. This is great. Let's launch it. The conversation shifted from reasoning to execution. And over time, the insights coming out of their experiments became less and less meaningful. They were running a ton of experiments, but really learning a lot less per experiment. And that's the danger of AI. And so we've seen this across organizations, right? And I'm sure Eric and team, you've seen this as you're, talking, training, like they think, oh, this is going to make everything go faster. And it's great, but you really have to have that thoughtful friction to have inspection and to really have that pillar of Scrum work and support you in a good environment with your team.
Yeah, I think it plays in multiple ways as well, Michelle. When we think about transparency, one, we need transparency into what's going on as you described. Two, AI can help me gain better transparency as well. It can listen in, right? It can hear things that we may not hear because of the biases that we have. It can communicate and help us communicate better with the team, providing more potentially transparency. It can help us inspect how we're working and suggest ways of improving the processes that we're using and the work that we're doing. At the same time, as you talked about, we need to inspect those things. Hallucination's real, and hallucination with AI is very, very real. And we need to be able to question it. We need to challenge the results, and understand where those results are coming from to ensure that we're getting valid information and valid data.
I agree. And I'm really glad you brought up bias because we always talk about the biases with AI, but we do personally have our own biases too, right? And so that's a really good point. And I think, yeah, I don't want to say like AI isn't awesome and it can provide that transparency, but we also need that human factor in there, right? How did AI influence the decision? I know when I use like ChatGPT or EPAM Dial, right? We it's funny how it now will look at my other chats and kind of make some assumptions.
Yep.
And I'll be like, wait, no, don't ignore those other chats. Start here, right? And so I think that's a really important aspect. Cool. That brings us to our next pillar then, impact on adaptation. And I'm sure you've seen, Eric, this in a lot of conversations where that adaptation, people just really want to make changes. If they see something, they really want to make those changes quick. And I think with AI, it allows you to move even quicker. And so when we think about adaptation, the outcome is really that meaningful inspection, how teams respond to that evidence. But we must ground it in understanding, not just speed. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
that's right. I mean, an AI can generate recommendations almost instantly. And so they might like, you can do this, you can do this, you should do this, you should do this, right? And so it'll suggest how to reprioritize your backlog. It will flag those risks that you're talking about. It will recommend shifting capacity based on pattern analysis. And we actually had something that happened with one of our organizations in the manufacturing area. The team introduced AI driven risk scoring into their backlog refinement. And that system analyzed historical defect data, delivery patterns, and flagged several upcoming work items as high risk. So the scores looked great. They were database backed. They appeared precise. And so during sprint planning, that team reacted quickly, right? Expect, adapt. Let's do it. So they moved those items out of the sprint and reprioritized lower scoring items. Seemed smart, seemed prudent to the team, but then after further review, they realized that that historical data feeding the model included a time when the team was a completely different staffing model, was using a completely different architecture. And so the risk pattern I can say that the AI detected really was based off of a completely wrong model. So garbage in, garbage out, right? And so because they adapted too quickly without taking the time, having some accountability as a team, they adapted to the wrong, signal.
Yeah,
So
it comes back to getting that challenge, and we need to challenge it. We need to, just like you would do with any other team member, and we talk a lot about this, and in thinking of AI as another member of the team. And we're going to
mhm,
challenge our team members. We're going to validate uh, what they say, what they do. We need to do the same thing there. Also, as we're rolling out AI and starting to use it, leveraging Scrum in that way as well. So
agree.
looking at, hey, what's the best way to roll out a new product. We've got this thing called Scrum that we can use for that. And constantly inspecting and adapting the usage of AI and the rollout of AI and looking at it like we would most other products and projects. And as we're delivering it forward, and even to the point that the AI tool we're using today may not be the right AI tool of tomorrow. And
True.
we may have to change it. We may have to swap it out and so on.
We do. That's a really good point because I have been involved in a number of AI adoptions, and I think that is one of my hardest hurdles
Yep,
is the thought of this is just a project. This is just a project with a start and an end date. And so therefore we're not going to use Scrum or Agile practices because this is just a project. Rather than understanding that just how Agile is a mindset, so is, bringing AI into your organization. You can't just say, okay, we're bringing AI in. We're starting February 1st and we're going to finish implementing AI on March 30th. Like that's just not how it works. But it's hard to get leaders to understand that this is something that they should continue to be on top of evolving. And I like, using Scrum in that way to manage bringing AI into an organization.
yep, absolutely.
That's, and I think like some of the questions teams need to ask are, does this signal reflect our current reality, right? So, hey, we notice this, we see there's a risk, but is that really reality? Like, let's think about it. We have to still use our brains to think, And then when you like, what LLM are you using? What data is it using to come up with it? The answers or the recommendations for adaptation. We have to consider all of that um, before we just jump and adapt, right?
Exactly.
So cool. All right. So there's lots of ways that we have seen AI used across organizations and really where we see the benefit. One of them is forecasting and planning. AI's ability to analyze that historical sprint data is amazing, right? It can look through backlogs like that, right? It can simulate capacity trade-offs, like we talked about in some of the examples previously, can detect hidden dependencies of risk early on. And when used responsibly, this strengthens the planning conversations even before you get begin. I know at one of the financial organizations where we are doing a massive pilot, they're using it for their planning. And so they use that to help them come up with, what should we be doing 3 months, 6 months, 9 months from now. It's not the over like we're not going to follow exactly what they're doing, but we are using that to just generate ideas to think about how we could prioritize. And like as a product owner, I feel like going out and using AI to understand market trends and what's out there, it can read so much faster, right? than I can, you can. So it's a great way to gather information. But again, you always have to go back to where's the data coming from? And so I think one thing to remember is that AI must function as your advisor, not your decider.
Yeah.
And the Scrum team owns your commitments. The product owner owns the value decision. And really, AI can enhance that foresight. I'm curious, Eric, in your training, what do you guys train about forecasting and planning as tied to AI?
Yeah, so in our product owner AI course, for example, we talk exactly about this and how we can use AI as a way to predict based on the future, but also based on where we're going. We spend a lot of time teaching people how to understand what customer needs are, interpret those customer needs, do persona building, right? So we can use AI to build out personas. Again, like you said, Michelle, we still need to validate that. We're not going to just take it as fact in a box. we're going to validate it, we're going to look at it, but we're using the AI to start doing that validation as well, and looking through how, what are the products that we want to build? What are the features that we want to build? If it's a product, I can use AI to even evaluate how the product's being used, and actually looking into the data of the usage data, and seeing patterns that I may not see myself, but it's able to go through that data and churn through that data quite quickly to identify patterns of usage and so on.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it might not give you, even if 50% of the response that you get is inaccurate, like some of the ideas I get from just throwing out a question, like, "Oh, I never thought about that," right? It just gives you just more to think about.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. I just want to real quick, please enter your questions into the Q&A, not into the chat. So we have everything in one place that we can answer those questions. Thank you.
awesome. All right, so let's talk about backlog prioritization or ordering. You know, I feel like a broken record over and over. AI can do all this stuff so fast, right? It takes that customer feedback, it takes the usage data, that no one person could just read through and understand all by themselves. And so it can help say, hey, we're getting a lot of feedback from customers about this issue. They'd really like to have this enhancement. And so it gives that increased visibility into patterns and unmet needs, and then can help you really think about the prioritization. And so it's strategic. When you think about prioritization, you reflect your vision, you want long-term direction, and AI can surface, some ideas and some of those signals. In the end, only the product owner defines the direction, but AI can really help see the connection in those emerging trends in their data. So it really ties back to that forecasting and planning almost too. But as you're building your backlog, as you're looking at your roadmap, AI can reveal so many possibilities. And then we want the humans, the product owners, the team to really think about and manage that priority. And so it's nice because with all the possibilities you can get, it really can also provide you potential risks, and they become visible sooner when they're more manageable. And that kind of is a segue into our risk awareness and quality, because this is really where AI can throw out so many ideas and of what you might be missing. It can scan for inconsistency. It can bring you consistency in your user story, in your acceptance criteria. It can think about missing edge cases. It can look at that historical defect patterns. It really is um, a powerful tool in that case. And it can validate. I know at one organization, as we're building user stories with AI, part of the agent is to validate against the definition of ready. Well, actually, we're not using definition ready, but their working agreements, what they want every user story to have, what their format is, requirements are for acceptance criteria. That's a lovely way to then improve your quality. They're using Gherkin, so therefore everything's in the right Gherkin format, so then it can easily be brought into Cucumber to create the test cases, right? And so that visibility, that potential is really invaluable. I know at one organization, we introduced AI assisted requirement analysis during backlog refinement. So as you're going through backlog refinement, you have this analysis that's up on the screen with the team. And the system started to highlight areas where requirements lacked sufficient detail, right? And so what what they've seen with defect trends out in production, uh, that they should consider. And so the team would talk about that during refinement. And it was awesome, right? And so you could really see the conversation improved. And there were times where it said, no, that's dumb. That thing that AI gave us is dumb. It doesn't make any sense. We're not going to, that wouldn't, that's not what we're going to do. But there were a lot of times that, it provided another, view or additional possibilities as to what to think about. And so rework did decrease in this case almost immediately. It was pretty inspiring to see. They didn't treat the AI output as truth, but they did treat it as, something to look at, like another junior team member, you know? And so it really gave them a more robust team for success.
And I think as we're looking at understanding risk and addressing quality, we have an opportunity to leverage AI heavily in this area. Have it
Yeah.
look at our definition of done and make suggestions for improvement, for example.
Yes.
If we're using definition of ready, feeding it what we think and actually even looking at now the criteria that we have to see, are we really ready?
Right.
Feeding it our definition of done and having it review to see, are we actually meeting our definition of done? So not just improving the DoD, but evaluating the
Yes.
criteria against it. And it's important now as we're building out our own internal um, AI engines, right? Those resources, we can start to feed it that. So now it's learning and constantly learning based on what we have in our box, if you will, and starting to address that. So, but at the same time, there's a different set of risk, which is, the things that we've been talking about. We need to continually evaluate the risk that we're getting with the AI as well. So it kind of balances both out. And
Hmm.
again, using Scrum as we're evaluating that, and using Scrum as a way to continually evaluate, do we need to change? Do we need to evolve? One of the big things that I've been telling people is don't sign a long-term contract on your AI product. Right
Right.
now, I'm going month to month. Yes, it's a little more expensive, but I've been throwing out tools and bringing on a new tool because it's changing so quickly. They're just
Yes.
leapfrogging each other. Right? There's a video tool that we use for AI video, some video creation and things. And the tool we were using 9 months ago, I think it was, fell behind, and a different tool was so much better 2 months later that we got rid of one, moved to the other.
Yes.
And that's happening over and over. That's part of the risk we need to evaluate. That's part of the quality we need to evaluate. Because if the companies are just relying on where they are today, they're going to be behind tomorrow. Those companies, those tools that you use and the products that you're using have to evolve very quickly with the technology.
Yeah. I had a team member, I think this was last fall, who said, I hate going to bed because every time I wake up, there's five new tools for me to learn.
Yep.
And so, totally true. We had the same experience with the video. We were using one that we thought was awesome, and then now we've moved to a new one that we're like, oh my God, this is incredible. So that's a good, yeah. All right. I think the one thing just to remember with risk awareness and quality, like there's a lot that can be automated. There's a lot that AI can help with, but it does not assume the responsibility for mitigating that risk, right? And taking accountability for it. So I saw one team do this in their sprint reviews. They added in, how did we use AI for this user story? And they actually included that in their sprint review, kind of as a double like check to just say, well, I used it here, I used it here. And then they were able to have the conversation of, well, did you validate and check it against this? Did you check it against this? So they kind of, as a team, they loved that they were using it, but they did their own checks and balances there.
Yep.
So cool. All right, freeing teams for higher level work, right? It's one of the most compelling benefits of using AI is really to reduce that repetitive cognitive effort. And so when you think, like we talked about, acceptance criteria generation, creating reports, drafting documentation. I mean, I we used AI to help us build the content for today, right? And then we reshaped it. And um, so we can really accelerate some of those tasks and help teams regain time, which is exactly what we want, organizations want, teams want to focus on that higher value work. And so uh, we want that experience for team members to become exciting using the creative work. I think the biggest thing we have to keep in mind as we're doing that is that clarity really depends on data and the data flow. And so if it's one of the things I don't know that organizations are really thinking of, just like when we were doing agile transformations as a whole. It was just like, let's start small, let's think about this. And yes, we can make siloed efforts and improvements team by team, but if organizations really want to gain the value of agile, they have to look at their entire organization and rethink the way that working. Scrum works everywhere, right? It works in HR, it works in marketing, it works in procurement. It doesn't just have to be in your PDLC, right? The same goes for AI. Um, but the way to really get that value is to allow your teams, put your teams on work such as creating that data at an organizational level, right? Having that data ecosystem fully integrated across product development, HR, procurement, operations, so that AI can really cross-functionally work across an organization is a is something that I think organizations are starting to finally talk about. Before it was small little experiments. It was great. We want to experiment, fail fast, all of that. But we can see operational performance data will, across the organization can influence your backlog prioritization. It can help with your teams. If you have your data organized correctly across your organization, your teams, your Scrum teams are going to work better because they're going to have access to all the data they need to for their product, for their team, for capacity planning. If you're tied into HR, so I think that's something that, as we're thinking about freeing teams for higher level work, we need to make sure that they have the data, the base there to help them do that higher level work too.
And as we're bringing on AI, think of it as if you're bringing on that teammate. We actually did a white paper and a webinar early, I guess late last year and early into this year around how do you hire AI, and really looking at it just like any other AI, any other hiring process. I have a need. I'm going to fill that need. I'm filling that need with a tool, and that tool becomes part of my team. I'm going to continually evaluate how we're using it. I'm going to evaluate its performance as well. And if it doesn't meet my needs, I might replace it with a different member of the team. And we need to constantly be doing that so that it can free us up to do the work that we need to do, so that it can empower us and feed us on the work that we need to do. So as I'm bringing on this new teammate, and I put the link to this white paper as well as another white paper that we did together with EPAM around Scrum and AI in this era. And check out those papers because I think they're very insightful. They also have lots of prompts in them. I know there's some people who've been asking about prompts. I think it would be boring to just do the webinar with a whole bunch of prompts, and some would be hitting what some people are interested in, not in others. But check those out. But as I'm thinking about what do I need? What do I need for my team? What do I need for my team to be more successful? And I build that job description and actually build it like I'm building a job description. And I'm going to interview the AI tools. What are the ones that I need that make sense for my team? Are they easy for my team to use, for them to get along with each other, right? And all of those aspects, as we're building out the portfolio that we're going to use. And we need to constantly measure. We talk
Yes.
about evidence-based management all of the time. We talk about through inspection and adaptation. Well, we inspect. Well, how do we inspect? We measure, right? Scrum is an empirical process. It's all about learning from what's happened and improving as we go. So we're going to learn, and if it's not meeting our needs, let's replace it. So we got to constantly put measures in place. Now, what are those measures? It depends on what you're trying to achieve. It'd be great if I could just say, here are all the measures I would measure. But what I would measure for my team might be very different than what you're using it for and the like. Now, are there some base measures? Yeah. Quality of outputs would be a great one. How often are we having to interact with it versus it's on its own? Are we actually using it? I've got a friend who works at a software company, and their company is mandating everyone must use AI. Okay, well, what does that
What
mean?
does that mean?
So guess what? They're all writing emails using AI, and they're meeting their they're meeting their criteria, but they're not really getting the value. They haven't invested in their
Right.
people to teach them the best ways of leveraging and using AI to accomplish their jobs. They could have gone out and said, okay, we're going to help enable you to leverage it as a teammate and bring it in. And here are different tools that we can use. But instead, they've just made this mass thing, and I've seen that in several companies of we must start using AI. Well, what does that really mean? And that's not going to free us up. It's going to be just like any other executive mandate where we just kind of go through the motions. And talking to my friend, they're annoyed, right? They're telling us we have to do this, but they're not telling us what to do, how to do it, why to do it. As a matter of fact, when we think about Scrum Masters, in Scrum Master usage of AI, we announced a new course today, Professional Scrum Master AI Essentials. And it really teaches Scrum Masters how to leverage AI in supporting the teams and rolling it out to their teams as well. And I think, you know, that's what we need to do with our folks. We need to help enable them so that they can focus on that value, so that they can become more valuable. And we need to look at it as the member of that team.
I love that. I also like as you're talking about the job description, that's great. That's really I like that, like for the AI, the junior AI, team member,
Yeah.
right? But I also think at the same time is we need to look at our job descriptions for the people too, right? Because I think with this higher value work, what does that mean? What does it mean? What are they doing? Their day to day should look much different now, but how should it look? What should they be doing? And it's also a journey to get to that for organizations and teams. And so I think a lot of that's missing right now. Like you're saying it at the organizational level. What's your AI strategy? How are you going to upskill your team members?
Yes.
What's their new role? And I really kind of like that job description. I'm going to play around with that.
Yeah,
Uh,
and AI is not replacing us. And I think
no,
there's this fear, and if someone asked the question, is AI replacing Scrum Masters and product owners? No, but it's going to help
no,
them be much, much, much more effective. And it's going to take some of the, I'll say, busy work away,
you're
um,
right.
to allow them and empower them to do other things. In all of us, not just the Scrum Masters and product owners, but all of us, it's going to help us be more effective. But it still needs to be watched. It still needs to be empowered. I can't just go and say, okay, AI, what product should I go build? And what should my backlog be? Now, can it build me a first pass, maybe at a product, pieces of a product backlog? Absolutely. But as the PO, I better look at it. It also doesn't understand and can't comprehend emotion and the other things. It's taking everything possibly as fact, and it's not seeing what's happening to people's faces or what their body language is and all of those things. As a Scrum
Sarcasm.
Master, yeah, right.
You can't tell the sarcasm, right?
Exactly. As a Scrum Master, I might be struggling with one of my Scrum team members. Well, I can leverage it to help me better find ways to improve, but I'm not just going to send AI over there to talk to them,
Right.
right? But I'm gonna leverage it as a tool in my toolbox to be able to improve the work. I might, in my retrospectives, I may have it listen and feed me back what it's hearing from that retrospective and things that maybe I don't see or maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I have seen that in retrospectives. I love it, right? Because I'll be like, I took away my vision of what I thought we had discussed and where we were at. And then you get this AI recap, and it's like, oh, well, I totally went down. And then so then you have to like rectify that, right? Like you have to align with the team. Did you actually mean this or did you mean this? So it improves that conversation. Um, but it also then gave me kind of a neutral, like second voice to say, Michelle, nope, you totally interpreted that completely differently than you should have.
So
So,
a question came up to something you just asked or
mhm.
said a minute or so ago. So I want to bring this one live now, which is, does AI really change our job description? Our accountability doesn't change. We just have a new tool. How would you respond to that?
Um, it depends. I think it does, though. I think, especially as we start seeing organizations using it more, they become a more dedicated team member. We change our ways of working because of that. So just like our job descriptions changed when we used Agile, when we started having product owners instead of BAs, right? Those job descriptions did change. I think AI will influence those job descriptions. It might not, it might be rather than, but it dep- I'm trying to think of a good example. So let's say my job is to create reports, create and, you know, document all changes made to the system. You're right, that might not specifically change, but I'm no longer spending 40 hours a week creating those reports. I'm now using AI and getting it done in 4 hours. So then what am I doing with my other 36 hours, right? And so I think that's where we'll see some shifting. We can maybe take on more accountabilities. We can evolve our roles.
Yeah, and I think even, from a Scrum Master perspective, how the Scrum Master is now going to enable the team on leveraging and using AI, right? So that's going to start to play into the job description. Um, so some of the things that maybe are offloaded to this new team member of AI maybe come out of my job description over time as we start to leverage it and as we start to use it more broadly. So there it's tweaks in evolution. You'll certainly see, and I'm seeing it as I look at it because I'm always looking at what's going on in the market, right? AI being put into job descriptions as well,
Yes.
and the knowledge and use as a product owner, it kind of plays in two parts. One is, how do I leverage AI? But also,
Mhm.
how do I start to build AI into my products? So
Yes.
having that knowledge and that understanding and the ability to do that research and figure that out. So the product owner, you're kind of wearing two hats here. One is, I can leverage this new tool to do my job, but also, what do I need to do with my products that I own to better AI enable them, if you will.
Right. Right. Like I think any online product right now better have a chat, right?
Right.
So now you didn't have that 10 years ago, like a little, but you had to have a chat and be able to have, provide answers to your customers quickly without a phone call. If you can have this AI CSR behind the system helping out with some of the basic things that's expected, and so you have to build your product to have that. So I think that's a great example, Eric. All right. Let's talk about speed, not agility, right? This seems like to be a conversation we've had for the last 20 years since we had Agile, Scrum come out, right? It's really tempting for teams, leaders, etc., to equate acceleration with agility, but we know they're not the same. I think I have one example that I like to share is we had an AI assisted backlog refinement that doubled their throughput. The metrics looked awesome. They were so impressive. But the customer outcomes did not improve. The team became really fast. It's great. Looked so good, those data, reports, but they were not smarter. And so, in contrast, other organizations have embedded AI forecasting into sprint planning and required structure and human validation. That predictability then improved and risks surfaced earlier. Learning increased, which is exactly what we want to have happen. And so it really just brings us to like remember that AI can support those decisions, but they can own them. And speed does not equal agility. Agility is that validated learning, and validated learning really requires the structure. And so we need to like not think about, oh, hey, we've increased our velocity by 20 points using AI. Well, is that because AI helped us create smaller user stories, or something like that? Like so, and like we have to get to customer value, customer outcomes. Is that really, are we satisfying our customers faster, better, happier? That's what we're looking for, not so much speed. All right. Our last slide, this is a little EPAM plugin. We have an AI run framework. So we try to do this using Scrum, uh, depending where our organizations are at. But it's really just giving us a responsible AI integration with intentional structure. So we know that all of this has to happen as you bring AI into your organization. And without that structure, it really, that speed that you want to move at to add AI, it does bring risk. And so just let it like little plugin for EPAM. If your company or organization is thinking about bringing AI into your organization, we are here to support. We have this awesome blueprint. It shouldn't say SDLC because we have now expanded. We use this across the entire organization and really help our companies bring in AI in a responsible way that keeps you aligned to what the industry is doing and where the market's going. Okay, I didn't know I had an extra slide in there. So, just for my conclusion, quick, and then we can take some some questions, more questions too. Is Scrum is not outdated in the age of AI. I really want to like. I hear that sometimes, like Agile's dead, Scrum is dead. We have AI now. That is absolutely not true. In fact, it's more important that we use Scrum in our agile practices to stay on top of the fast-paced world that we're in. And so AI can increase that speed, capability, and ambiguity, but Scrum anchors us in teams in empiricism, and that is really, you know, something we can't lose sight of.
And when we talk about where does Scrum function the best in complex worlds? Well, what gets much more complex than this
Right.
topic?
Yes, that's
Absolutely. So we've got a bunch of questions. We'll get through as many as we can. And I'll kind of go through them and look at, I'll probably combine some things as well as there's similar questions and the like. So first off, if I understand it correctly, AI is about giving outputs objectively, but there are problems due to human error, input data, etc. How do you start to handle some of those things?
that's it's a lot of work, right? Like, and so I'll give you an example at an organization we're at now. They are talking about data, doing that AI native organization, right? And so that means pulling all their data into a centralized place and cleaning it up. And that's a huge effort. There is no way to do that even within 1 year. So they're picking a vertical slice, which is what we always like to do, right? They're picking a vertical slice, cleaning up that portion of data, starting to use AI where they can with that data, and then moving on to the next slice. And so I think as teams, as leaders, we have to remember that most of our data is probably not clean. And AI can only do what AI has access to. So we have to expect that there is going to be some data cleanup to really take advantage of using AI tools.
Great. So another question. We kind of answered this one already, but we'll see if we can go a little bit deeper if we need to. Since AI is going to make facilitation a lot easier, will the Scrum Master role still be relevant? Or how does it change when it comes to AI being involved?
I think you did mention some good
Yeah.
areas of that already, Eric, but I'll say what I'm seeing is our Scrum Masters are becoming a little more technical. than they always had to be in the past, just because they have to use these AI tools now, right? And in some cases, depending on the tools that they're using, um, we have some of our Scrum Masters that are learning Python now to help use AI to pull their reports to show those risks. So they're still absolutely 100% necessary. They still keep the team, protected. They still coach them in agile practices. They help, facilitate and help with all of the events in Scrum. But they can take it up a level now, and they can, like, some of the reports I now see, some of the, like how they're using, um, for example, like they've created estimating or how to, like, hey, this story's too big. And the Scrum Master is able to use some of those tools to push back on the team and the PO to say, hey, according to our little estimator, this is like actually 5 days of work, not 1 day of work. So it's kind of just given us another,
It opens up the opportunity for conversation, right?
yes,
And
there we
and
go.
and,
Yeah,
and to have those conversations and challenge, challenge each other, challenge the AI, challenge ourselves. But the Scrum Master, their role evolves and it continues to evolve, but it certainly doesn't go away. There's going to be some things that maybe are more valuable than others that they can do as they move forward. Like you said, they need to understand the AI. I even see over time, right? The Scrum Master, at the end of the day, the Scrum Master is responsible for one thing. It's making sure that the team is effective. Right? And
yep,
are we delivering value? And are we effective? Now I can leverage these tools to help me become more effective and help the team become more effective. Um, the tool by itself doesn't do that. Just throwing a tool in there and listening and making suggestion doesn't see that, Billy over there was just sitting in the corner during the daily scrum, frowning and with their head down because something's upsetting them. And there's those opportunities to take advantage of these different things, and leverage the tools for guidance, leverage the tools to learn. The Scrum Master also, I really do think they're going to become more and more important in the rollout of AI tools and technologies.
I agree. I agree. Like going back to that one example with the sprint review, that's a great place for the Scrum Master to be like, create a format to make sure in your Scrum reviews, you're talking about how AI influenced each of these user stories to get done and holding the team accountable for transparency.
Exactly. So you had mentioned earlier, it's probably one of your early slides. What I'll ask the question here as it's written, but wouldn't AI solutions be solutions in themselves for providing transparency and detailing of the black box ingredients for upcoming with the original results, simply by adding a final prompt for describing what specific contributors led to the analysis? What are some of the recommendations? Those sorts of things. How are you, Michelle, seeing AI used to open the black box, if you will?
Yes, that is a great question. In fact, it brings me back to my children writing papers in college. And so they write their papers, right? And then they might ask AI for some help. Well, they have to cite all the sources they used. And so I've seen them then go in and say, where did you get this information? Cite and share where you got this information. Great idea, because then I can create their footnotes or their, but I think that's a really good point. Absolutely. You can ask AI where they got the information, and how they got to that conclusion and why. That's a great prompt to include, and maybe that's, something that you just build into your working agreements. When you're
Yeah,
using AI, you also back it up with figuring out how they got to that information.
absolutely. That's a great idea. So what are some of the tools that you're using or using with your clients today?
Oh, so many, so many.
That's the hard part, and they change every day.
Yes, it changes every day, and everyone's tool stacks are different. Um, we do a lot with our EPAM product itself, Alita, which is an orchestrator across the PDLC, a genic orchestrator that can help you throughout the cycle. So we build agents for creating user story, for analyzing data, for automated QA, for code reviews, creating technical documentation. That's one developers love us to build for them. We also use, GitHub Copilot a lot with organizations, Cursor, um, just even Microsoft Copilot Suite. Uh, they are really all over the board. It's interesting as you go into these organizations that have tried to experiment, like what they've experimented in, and so you find I'm like, oh, that's one I haven't heard of. Okay, let's go like research
Yeah.
that. Or the one company we went to and we did a adoption workshop, they had already experimented with probably 20 plus tools. And I'm like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. Like, just pick one or two to start with. Let's see. Let's fail fast and let's see. And then let's, move on if it's not the right tool for us. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And there's definitely no one tool that does it all. Right. And so right
Uh,
now we're working with an organization on ServiceNow in their Now Assist piece. And so they have AI built into ServiceNow. It does some things, it doesn't do other things. So then you got to add to that to get their entire HR workflow to work with that. So, you
Yeah, and starting to build out that repository so it knows how you work, what you do, knows the messaging that you're going for, updating it. One of the things we do, we're kind of a Google shop, and so we use Gemini, and
yep,
we've created a Google Drive where we're feeding it information. So when I ask a question, it's actually going against what's in that Google Drive so that it's answering in context of how we think and in context of the things that we're doing. And it's really important to feed that. So if you start asking questions, making sure you're feeding it the documents that tell your message and tell your story and the like. I use a lot of the tools that are built into other products. Right? People are
yes,
starting to build in a lot of AI technology into their products. I quote my son a lot. My son's a software developer, and he always says he hates AI, and he doesn't really hate AI, and that's not what he means. What he then often goes on to say is, well, people are dumb. I'm like, okay, you're not wrong, dude, but because people just take it for fact.
yes,
And that's his concern. His concern
yes,
is I would call it the governance piece of all of this. And his concern is, and I see it, you see it with Google all the time. People Google something, they read that AI piece and take it
yes,
for fact. And
yes,
not. And when I dig into what his real concern is and have that conversation, it's that you need to challenge it. You need to, as Michelle, you said, you need to look at the sites and the resources and where did this information come from. We can't take it for fact. Just because that person on our team sounds confident every time they say something, we still need to challenge them.
right.
And his fear is we stop challenging and we stop really putting that governance in place. So
I agree. Yep.
I apologize. We're kind of at time. I want to kind of stick to our time box here. We do have other questions, and we'll try to take those and answer them offline. So we'll look at those and kind of try to get back to y'all. I want to thank you, Michelle, and thank you for taking the time today. Thank you to the audience for joining. The recording and the slides will be up on the website within the next 24 hours. Don't forget to check out our new Scrum Master course as well that we released today. And with that, thank you.